Scientists from Bayer have known the dangers insects pose for a long time. They work continually to study insects, especially fleas and mosquitoes, and to develop new compounds to combat them. From research such as this, Advantix was born. Ectoparasites like ticks, fleas and also mosquitoes are a nuisance on their own, though their medical importance is due to the pathogens they harbour. Nowadays, vector-borne diseases caused by mosquitoes, like canine leishmaniasis, or virus diseases like the West Nile virus, are in focus both in human and veterinary medicine. Here you can see a typical blood-feeding insect, the sandfly. Female sandflies need a blood meal to produce eggs and continue the life cycle. The female feeding on an infected host ingests blood together with the pathogen, the Leishmania parasite. The results can be seen here. Dogs develop severe clinical symptoms, the skin lesions being the most visible signs. With mosquitoes and sandflies becoming major threats for humans and dogs worldwide, let's meet Peter Wolf from the Charles University in Prague, a specialist in sandfly research. In his laboratory, Peter works continually to gain further knowledge and a deeper understanding of sandfly biology, the interaction with the host during blood feeding, and the transmission of pathogens. Mice, experimentally infected with Leishmania infantum, show typical skin lesions similar to those in dogs. No one wants to see such lesions on children or on our four-legged family members. Up until now, we've just talked about the Trojan horse, the sandfly. Peter will show us both the morphology of the sandfly and the Leishmania parasite within the sandfly body fluids. The most advanced molecular biological research would be impossible without access to the organism of interest. Therefore, next to the research is the insect breeding colony. Again, Peter has expertise with his sandfly breeding colonies, one of the few places in the world that breed sandflies from around the world in large numbers. As is known from other insects, sandflies have adapted well to tropical and subtropical ecological systems and breeding places, for the offspring are highly dependent on microclimate and nutritional supply. The secret is rabbit dung, fermented by certain fungi, so proteins and other nutrients necessary for the sandfly larvae are produced. Sandflies follow the same life cycle with a complete metamorphosis from egg, larval stages, pupation and adults as any other insects, for example houseflies or mosquitoes. Sandflies are creatures of the night, or as biologists would say, nocturnal blood feeders. Once the female sandflies land on the host animal, they move rapidly over the coat, searching for relatively hairless areas. These are usually found in the head region, where they like to feed around the muzzle, mouth, eye or ear, as seen here. Controlled laboratory studies have been performed to evaluate the mosquito efficacy of Advantix. Advantix-treated and untreated control dogs were exposed to sandflies on a weekly basis over a period of 4 weeks. "200 hungry females were released into the mosquito-proof cage holding an anesthetized dog. After the light is dimmed, feeding occurs immediately. Fully engorged females from the cages of the untreated control dogs, resting and digesting, are seen here. In Advantix-treated dogs, the mosquitoes avoided the dogs as much as possible, seeking the upper corners of the net. After a 2-hour exposure time, the dogs were removed and mosquitoes collected, both dead and alive, using an aspirator. Then followed the laborious part of the study, counting all individuals and grouping them into unfed and fed. By doing so, it was possible to observe, record, and later calculate the repellent efficacy. Similar studies as those shown here have been performed, recorded, and published using mosquitoes of the Aedes and Culex genesis. They're known to be vectors of protozoan, viral, and bacterial pathogens, with malaria as the most serious threat to human health and a variety of viruses in veterinary medicine.
V těchto experimentech jsme se zaměřili na otázku, jak
In the study shown here, we focused on the question of how to protect the dog from sandfly bites. The disease transmission is faster than the action of any insecticide, even those that have strong knockdown and killing effects. These insecticides can kill the insect but can't prevent the transmission of leishmania. The solution to overcome this is the so-called anti-feeding or repellent effect. I conducted a study with Flebótomos papatazi in my laboratory to investigate the repellent effect of Advantix. I've seen tests using other insecticides against sandflies on mice, which mostly fail. In the case of permethrin, the strong anti-feeding as well as the acaricidal properties are known from literature, while the effects we've seen in this study were overwhelming and, for me, even surprising. The combination of the insecticide imidacloprid with the pyrethroid permethrin appears to enhance the effects on sandflies. In untreated control dogs, it was visible that the female sandflies were eager to approach and feed upon the dogs. They landed on the hair coat and searched for a feeding place around the head, belly, legs and other areas. In the treated dogs, however, the sandflies tried to land, but the surface of the dogs was clearly unpleasant, and the attempt to search for a feeding spot was immediately discontinued. We could easily distinguish the treated dogs from the controls, even when the study was blind. In cages with treated dogs, sandflies stayed as far from the dog as possible, along the ceiling. The combination of imidacloprid and permethrin demonstrated a remarkable anti-feeding effect against sandflies. The results we've obtained from this 4-week study showed that the spot-on treatment using Advantix gave a high degree of protection from sandfly bites, suggesting that this product can greatly reduce the risk of infection with the protozoan parasite Leishmania infantum. Let's now move south from the laboratory to the sun-kissed Mediterranean, first to Italy, more precisely the coastline of Liguria. This ancient cultural home of mankind is also inhabited by a major threat, the sandfly. The vector of canine leishmaniasis, the sandfly, and its major host, our beloved companion the dog, live in close proximity. Dogs that stay outdoors overnight are vulnerable to sandfly attacks. Even more so, this rural dog in its kennel close to the stone wall, the favourite sandfly resting places. Sandflies don't have to move far from these cracks and holes between the stones for their first blood meal after sunset. We followed this dog from its kennel into a veterinary small animal clinic for a health check. The unprotected dog was infected and shows clinical signs of canine leishmaniasis caused by Leishmania infantum. These symptoms are anemia, shown by pale mucosa, swelling of subscapularis lymph nodes, poor condition and alopecia, skin lesions like chronic ulceration, and malformation of the claws, called onychogryphosis. A blood sample is taken from this diseased dog into the laboratory for further investigation. A differential blood analysis as well as a serum protein electrophoresis is performed. This dog shows the characteristic protein pattern of the immunoglobulins. A high peak in the IgG region, in comparison to this pattern from a healthy, uninfected dog. Veterinarians therefore recommend a health check around the end of the sandfly season. Since canine leishmaniasis is a serious threat for the dog's health, protective measures should therefore include the application of Advantix in a multi-spot treatment as here in large dogs. Advantix repels and kills sandflies and other ectoparasites before these are able to bite and possibly transmit diseases. In dogs of less than 10 kilograms body weight, an application at a single spot is recommended, as we see here. In Italy, there are millions of dogs infected or with clinical symptoms. Some do not show clinical symptoms, and therefore infection can only be determined using laboratory methods. These dogs are an active reservoir for maintaining transmission. The symptoms of canine leishmaniasis are overall polymorphic. The clinical presentation can be asymptomatic, symptomatic, or highly symptomatic. The most frequent symptoms are ongoing weight loss, anemia and early fatigue, together with cutaneous lesions. Nevertheless, you rarely find ulcers and nodules. The cutaneous lesions will often be found at the nose and in the head region, where sandflies prefer to bite. At the same frequency, you can often observe swollen lymph nodes and swelling of the spleen, anemia, epistaxis and ocular lesions. One feared complication that occurs frequently is renal insufficiency.
E le lesioni oculari, una complicazione molto temuta e purtroppo frequente è l'insufficienza renale.
Pharmaceutical products mostly used for canine leishmaniasis therapy are antimum, allopurinol and amphotericin B. Unfortunately, none of these are able to eliminate the parasites completely from the dog's organism. Therefore, in most cases, symptoms will return and the dog will remain an active reservoir where the vector insect can ingest the parasites. Since the therapy of this disease is complex and often no resolution of the problem is possible, and considering that up to now no efficient vaccine exists, it's important to reduce sandfly feeding to an absolute minimum. The most efficient preventative measures are housing dogs indoors overnight, using insecticides in the house, and applying repellent products on the dogs in order to prevent the transmission of leishmaniasis. Recommended parasiticides in veterinary medicine available today contain deltamethrin or permethrin. Recently, a combination was introduced containing imidacloprid with permethrin in a spot-on formulation. Advantix is the only spot-on product available that kills and repels fleas, ticks, sandflies and mosquitoes. Let's move back into a laboratory, this time to the WHO reference laboratory of Ricardo Molina in Madrid, Spain. Further research is essential to learn more about the sandfly and to understand the transmission of leishmania to dogs as well as to humans. Sandfly saliva contains anticoagulants, various anti-inflammatory enzymes and vasodilatory peptides. These components create an ideal environment for the transmitted parasites. Dissection shows the digestive tract of the sandfly. The leishmania parasites are carried within. Sandflies have developed a complex mechanism in host seeking, host landing and feeding. Today, in vitro methods are in place to mimic the natural sandfly behavior by membrane feedings. Flebótomos females have sunset biting habits. In other words, they can begin biting just after sunset until late dawn. They fly at low height close to the soil, seeking a vertebrate. After biting, each blood intake induces a process which ends with egg laying. The leishmaniasis transmission risk is associated with the seasonal mosquito dynamics, having in Spain peaks in July and September. The transmission itself is always associated with the Flebótomos and takes place at the precise moment of the mosquito bite. Therefore, an infected dog does not represent any direct risk of transmission to the human beings. My basic recommendations are related to the proverb, prevention better than cure. It's of vital importance to avoid direct contact between Flebótomos and dogs or human beings. In the case of human beings, a good prevention measure is the use of mosquito nets impregnated with insecticides with repellent and residual effect. It's important to point out that the mosquito nets have to have smaller holes than the standard ones, of 0.4 to 2 millimeters approximately. In the case of dogs that can be host to Leishmania family parasites, Bayer Animal Health has developed a new product specifically designed to repel the mosquito transmitter of the illness. This product is based on the synergic combination of the active ingredients imidacloprid and permethrin and has a spot-on topical application form. The repellent effect of this product, which has also ticicide and fleacide effects, is another efficacious weapon for the prevention of canine leishmaniasis. Clinical management of canine leishmaniasis includes a complete case history of each dog. This diseased, though recovered boxer shows a uveitis as the last clinical symptom from previous infection. Based on the individual dog and the owner's living circumstances, the therapy, the even more important prevention, and annual checks at the end of the sandfly season have to be implemented and are part of good veterinary practice in leishmania prevention. Bone marrow puncture, as shown here, and examination of the aspirate for leishmania represent the traditional gold standard for the diagnosis of an established disseminated infection. In endemic areas, dogs initially infested with leishmania show superinfection with other ectoparasites like Demodex mites or deep pyoderma, as in this case. The clinical symptoms of the initial leishmania infection are still present: uveitis and secondary eye infection, dry desquamation of the muzzle, and ulceration of the elbow. Hematology and, more importantly, examination of the bone marrow aspirate are performed in the laboratory. Within the Giemsa-stained bone marrow smear, Leishmania amastigotes can be detected. Successful therapy is proven by their absence, certainly in combination with the absence of clinical signs.
Las manifestaciones clínicas de la leishmaniosis canina.
The clinical features of canine leishmaniasis vary widely. While we see depression, adenopathy, weight loss and skin lesions as the most prominent manifestations. The skin lesions are either keratoseborrheic disorders like alopecia around the eyes, hyperkeratosis of the nose, or generalized seborrheic dermatitis. In our clinic, we also see chronic eye lesions such as blepharoconjunctivitis, keratitis or uveitis. In addition, generalized inflammation of various organs like the GI tract, kidneys, mucosae, as epistaxis, and immune-mediated polyarthritis, to name only the most prominent symptoms. Dogs that are referred to our veterinary teaching hospital at Madrid University are often in the chronic stage of the disease. But also we see clinical cases with atypical signs of disease. We know today that in all parts of Spain, except for the far north, dogs are at risk of exposure to the parasite. In these endemic areas, the prevalence of canine leishmaniasis was reported to be between 3 and 15% for some regions. My recommendations are the following. I examine every dog that comes into the clinic thoroughly to check on the health status. We also collect a blood sample to be tested in the laboratory. My advice to the owner is to perform regular examination in late autumn in order to find seroconversion from a previous infection. Furthermore, any dog with exposure to sandflies should be under preventive measures. The duration has to be at least for the sandfly season. That is, in the Madrid area from early March until, depending on the weather pattern, late September, sometimes even late October. We as veterinarians are at the forefront of public health education by explaining the zoonosis potential involved in these so-called vector-borne diseases. The active compounds available as veterinary products in the Spanish market are pyrethroids, which are insecticides as well as acaricides, which means active against ticks. For us as veterinarians, the most important feature besides the strong insecticidal and acaricidal property is the repellent activity. Repellency is important in the prevention of canine leishmaniasis by avoidance of sandfly contact with the dog. A new product from Bayer Animal Health is specially designed to protect dogs from infestation with ectoparasites like fleas and ticks, and repels insects like sandflies. The product contains a combination of the well-known imidacloprid with permethrin. This new remedy is designed for topical, spot-on application, and one of the many features is a strong and lasting repellent effect against sandflies. Leishmania therapy was successful in this boxer. Now, prophylaxis has to be implemented using Advantix during the sandfly season to prevent reinfection. Advantix for dogs. The innovative solution against ticks, fleas, sandflies and mosquitoes, a product of ongoing Bayer research.